Happy T-shirt Tuesday. The shirt that I am wearing today is actually vintage, and I don't mean vintage like I found it at a thrift store. I mean I've had this shirt for over 20 years vintage. Let's talk about Tales from the Hood, which apparently now is a trilogy. I actually haven't seen this movie in years, not since it came out. And I remember when it came out, my stepfather kept on repeating the mortuary dude's line, "Oh yes, you'll get the shit." This is an anthology series, and it starts with a wraparound story, which is three guys going to a mortuary to retrieve some drugs that the mortician found on a dead body. Looking back at this now, the mortician looks like Samuel Jackson's character of Mr. Glass. Looks like it was modeled off of this mortician. So anyways, he tells these three young men a series of 3 tales. The first story is about a rogue cop revelation. It starts off showing police brutality over the soundtrack of Billie Holiday singing Strange Fruit, which if you listen to the lyrics of Strange Fruit, it's a story basically about lynching. This story explores the code of conduct that police officers have with each other surrounding not snitching. One of the police officers is so struck with guilt that he quits the force and becomes an alcoholic. He's then contacted in a supernatural way, and the other cops that are dirty get their comeuppance. After all these years, the practical effects still hold up. One of the victims looks a lot like the hit and run victim from the Thanks for the Ride Lady segment in Creepshow 2. And also the graffiti artwork of another character reminds me a lot of the graffiti that was in Candyman. The score is excellent, and this was very cinematic. Story 2, I believe, is called Do Boys Get Bruised? It's a story about a little boy named Walter, who is afraid of a monster that abuses him at night. This story turns out to be a metaphor for something else as well, which predates the Babadook by 20 plus years. And I'm going to keep doing that. As I review movies from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, I'm going to keep pointing out when these horror movies display social commentary within the subtext of their stories. Because for some reason the media keeps acting like this is a brand new, groundbreaking thing in horror, and it's not. The acting in this segment was excellent. David Alan Grier, who is a comedic actor, did a great job as a dramatic horror actor. There was only one comical line that he delivered, and it was right when he got his comeuppance. The child actor did great as well. The effects team really did their job in this one, although I did laugh at the ending effect of what happened to David Alan Grier's character. The third story is called KKK Comeuppance. It is about a nefarious politician who lives on a plantation and is super racist. The house has this huge painting with what they call a voodoo woman in the painting and all of her dolls. He's told that this house is haunted and that those dolls will seek revenge, which of course he doesn't believe. I'm laughing because I actually wrote in my notes, he has a Caramel Coon campaign advisor. Sometimes I'm surprised by my own self. Anyways, that's what I'm gonna call him, and he meets his end through an unfortunate accident within the house. The camera work in this segment really shines. The zoom-ins, the camera angles, the point of view shots, especially from the doll's point of view, were really impressive. Again, the score remains strong as well as the sound design throughout this segment. To get the full effect, listen to this movie or watch this movie in surround sound, and you'll hear the little footsteps of the dolls running around you, and they come through like different speakers, like from one side of the room to the other side of the room. It's a really great effect. It looks like they use stop motion for the doll's movement, and that works out very good for me. I am a fan of stop motion. I'll take stop motion over CGI any day of the week. I would say that the doll's movement in this is similar to that of the puppets in Puppet Master. Story 4 is called Hardcore Convert. Some gang members get into a shootout with another set, I'm guessing, and then the police show up and shoot everybody. One of them survives, and he's offered a deal to get out of prison if he submits himself to a behavioral modification experiment. The facility that they take him to has a very 1930s Frankenstein meets 1950s drive-in look to it. And then they solidify this by having a character named Dr. Cushing, which is most likely an homage to the Hammer horror film actor Peter Cushing. For some reason, the prisoner Jerome is in a banana hammock. The video and musical behavioral modification is still relevant to this day. The practical effects in this segment were the best in the whole series, especially the dude that had half his head blown off. And at this point we find out that the wraparound story involving the criminals, the three criminals coming to the mortuary to get the found drugs, is called Welcome to the Mortuary. And there's a really great reveal here. I would talk about it, but I want people who haven't seen this to enjoy it for the first time the way I enjoyed it way back in the day. So I won't tell you what happens ultimately at the end with the wraparound story. You just have to watch it for yourself. But I will say that it worked off the strength of the actors. Without that, it could have come off very corny, and they were able to sell it. I'm going to come back in a second and talk about Tales from the Hood 2. Be back in a minute. Alright, let's get cracking at part 2. The opening caught me off guard with the CGI skeletons because that came off very, very dated. Fortunately, they don't last that long, and we get right to the movie. In this, the wraparound story is about a sexist, racist corporate prison owner who's talking to a black gentleman about an AI police force, or rather, a robotic AI police force. He's saying that he is going to tell the robot several stories so that they'll know who and who not they should incarcerate or execute. The first story, I believe, is called Good Golly, and it features the Museum of Negrosity. There's two girls going to this museum that look like twins, except one is black and one is white. Like, they look like the same person, but just like two different versions of the same person. They even have matching weave ponytails. They go to this messed up museum filled with gollywogs and other messed up racist memorabilia. It would seem overdone how the white friend acts, but some people actually are that clueless. No, for real, I knew a girl in school, well, I wouldn't describe her as clueless, just unaware. And she said she wanted to have her wedding at a plantation because they're so beautiful. And I was taken aback by that because in my mind, I'm like, where are you going to have the reception, Auschwitz? Anyway, the black girl lets this guy talk her into letting him pick up a whip and pretending to beat her with it. What the hell? I get I mean, it's not even subtext, because subtext means underneath. It wasn't underneath at all. It was blatant as hell. Oddly, there are people like her that exist. I was listening to a stand-up comedian, although he might be joking, but a lot of truth is said in jest. And he was joking about how he likes to be called the N-word, you know, during intimate times. And to me, that's like, wow. But apparently that's a thing that some people engage in. There is a cameo in this from the first movie. Tell me in the comments if you know who or what it was. A lot of stuff happens in this segment. It feels like I'm talking very dirty, but it's not even reaching the levels of what actually happened in this segment. So be forewarned about that. Like, I said some things that were a little bit risque. Not as risque as what's in this segment, or at least what ultimately happens in this segment. The second story is called The Medium. This one opens up with a guy tied to a chair and two people beating the crap out of him. Apparently he's an ex-pimp who went straight and opened a business with the goal of providing jobs and helping the children in the community. The dudes beating the crap out of him and extorting him don't care, and one of them has the audacity to have an onk on. Then it cuts from that scene to two women in the audience of like a fake psychic TV show. And at first I'm like, how did these two things go together? Because there was not really a transition. The story does connect one thing to another, and I actually find this turn of events interesting. I didn't care for the score. It felt very 1990s sitcom TV show, and it didn't seem to fit with the movie at all. Then they get back to the horror, and just when things are about to get interesting again, they mess it up with CGI. Let me rephrase. They mess it up with cheap, badly done CGI. Not all CGI is bad. If it were, we wouldn't have a whole Avengers franchise to look at. That CGI is pretty good. This CGI is not. This segment took a very interesting premise and concept and messed it up with corny deaths. The third story is called Date Night. This segment starts with 3 guys in a car cruising and talking about these girls that they're about to go and meet. So they get to the house and start playing Cards Against Humanity in this really red lighting. Then they have drinks and suddenly it's no longer lit red, it's lit yellow. Then they mess around and do something really messed up to the girls. What takes me out of the moment is that the room couldn't look more like a set if they tried. Also, the girls' hair was restyled and it looked completely different during the course of the scene from when the gentleman first arrived. And I know a lot of times productions shoot over a number of hours or over a number of days, but you have to have like some continuity. I won't tell you how it ends, but the setup is that, you know, these guys do something terrible to these girls and obviously they're going to get their comeuppance. Story 4 is called The Sacrifice. In this sequence, a couple of, I would say like maybe 30ish, 40ish year old white dudes knock on the door and demand that this little black boy go with them. This turns out to be a dream sequence of a pregnant woman who keeps having this feeling that someone's going to try to take her baby from her. Then it bounces through time, so you're wondering, is this a memory through generations past or is it a dream? Whichever it is, I'm very engaged and I want to see how these two stories are going to be connecting. Wow, when they brought up polling places being closed in predominantly black areas, how relevant was that? Especially right now. The husband of the pregnant woman is a city councilman running a fundraiser for a gentleman who looks similar to Colonel Sanders. They reference Emmett Till in this segment, which is heartbreaking if you know the story of Emmett Till. And this is kind of actually doubly heavy if you watch Sunday night's episode of Lovecraft Country. So now I've seen 2 references to Emmett Till in horror movies this week. So I'm gonna have to watch something really funny or stupid before the end of the week. I felt like the alternate reality part of this was kind of deep. Respect the sacrifice. Again, not gonna spoil the ending for this segment, but then it goes back to the wraparound story called Robo Hell. Let's talk about how good this actor is. He always turns in a great performance. From he was in They Live, the whole put the sunglasses on segment, that was great. Even comedic acting when he was in Something About Mary. How'd the beans get above the Frank? He's another actor that I used to confuse for other actors. I've done this in my videos before where I talk about actors that I confuse for each other. I used to confuse him with the guy that played Winston on Ghostbusters, Ernie Hudson. I also used to confuse Donnie Simpson for the lead singer of Kool and the Gang because they look alike to me. And when I was a kid, I thought Peter Weller and James Woods were the same person. Now we know the difference. One of them's an asshole and the other one makes cool movies like RoboCop. I did like the subtext in this segment with the white woman being treated poorly but still going along with it. And I mean, I might be ashamed to admit it, but I did get a chuckle out of the like, see, I'm laughing just thinking about it, the dumbass bitch part. That's not relating to the woman. That's a whole nother segment relating to someone else. I don't want anyone to think that, you know, they're just being super disrespectful to women in this movie, but there is a joke with the words dumbass bitch involved that made me chuckle. Although the robot CGI was pretty bad. It was like mid-90s Disney Channel CGI. This movie got a bad rap because it's not as iconic as the original Tales from the Hood. I would say the weakest story is the first one with the giant gollywog. The second story was not super strong either. It was kind of, how do I say this? It was not horrible, but then again, my bar for horrible goes pretty low. Like I watch horror movies that are shot on VHS on Amazon Prime. You know what I'm talking about. Those Amazon Prime movies where it looks like somebody just rented a house for, like, maybe they got an Airbnb for like 2 weeks and then shot the movie and there's like no pictures on the wall, no furniture, and everything is shot in close up. It's just like reverse shot close up of the actors, and the stories kind of suck, and well, they're just generally bad. You gotta know what type of movie I'm talking about. Amazon Prime, well, because anyone can publish to Amazon Prime, which I think probably eventually I'll probably end up making a horror movie someday. Just because they let anyone with a camera do it. So, like I was saying, my barometer for bad is really, really low. So for me to say, like, something's got to be really, really bad for me. Okay, I'll tell you my barometer for bad. My barometer for bad is the last Hellraiser movie. I turned it off 30 minutes in because it just... I was so disgusted. So disgusted. I haven't reviewed the whole Hellraiser series yet because I feel like Hellraiser fans, we are the most abused fans. We still hold out hope. It's like an abusive relationship, because you keep thinking, oh, you know, they apologized and then they said they're never going to do it again, and next time it'll be different, but it isn't. They come up with another crappy ass Hellraiser movie that has nothing to do with it. Doesn't even feel like the original. I'm going to give even a third one something. Like most of the time, I'll say the first two are the really genuine Hellraiser movies, but 3 was technically kind of genuinely a Hellraiser movie. But like I was saying, it's like being in an abusive relationship where your abuser keeps telling you they're never going to hurt you again, but then they keep hurting you. That's what the Hellraiser sequels are to us. Sorry for that side rant. I think I've ranted about Hellraiser before. Y'all let me know in my comments if you remember if I've ranted about Hellraiser before. I don't remember whether I have. But suffice it to say, this movie wasn't the worst, not as bad as what people are, what I've seen a lot of people say, but it isn't good either. It's nowhere near the level of the first Tales from the Hood. And since Tales from the Hood 3 comes out today, I'm interested to see whether they got better, because that happens too. Sometimes a part 1 and a part 3 are better than part 2. It happens all the time. But that's all I have to say about this segment. I'm going to go watch part 3 now, and then I'll be back, and however long that takes to watch it, and tell you what I thought of it. See you in a minute.